Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the shooting of Rayshard Brooks. The first thing I want to say, of course, is that I send out my condolences to the family and friends of Rayshard Brooks. I'm sorry this is belated. I just got his birthday recently. I just got it, and what happened was I got it from, there was a video on YouTube that was shown with him, and where he was being questioned by the police, and they asked him what his birthday was, and he stated it in the video as January 31st, 1993. So that is what I am going with, and of course that puts his sun in Aquarius. It has the moon in Taurus. And when I looked at, I don't have the time of birth, of course, because that's the only information and data I was able to get, of course, because obviously they're not going to say the time in that video, a time of birth in the video. But of course, when I looked at his chart, of course I did did a solar sunrise chart. I had to improvise once again and put the sun at the spot at the ascendant, and basically and based the chart on and drew the chart up, of course, again with the sun being at the same spot as the ascendant. And the thing about this was, if I remember right, I mean, well, I know he had a preponderance of major astrological influences. I know he did in fixed signs. He had like 7 of 12 major astrological influences in fixed signs. And when I'm talking about major astro influences, of course, I'm referring to the 10 astrological planets, the midheaven, and the ascendant. And when you have like 7, you have such a strong majority of energy there, of course, in fixed signs. Of course, that could give a very very intransigent, immutable, inflexible type of nature. And with him, and I'm not faulting him or trying to condemn him or chastise Rayshard Brooks, but obviously he did not cooperate with the police. His killing was not justified. I understand that, but when he had 3 planets in Aquarius: the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn. We have a strong Aquarius energy like that. Of course, you can be known for that. Kind of, especially when you have the sun in Aquarius shining, so to speak, in being the rebel, the nonconformist. And the thing about it is, he's obviously was somebody that was probably likely somebody that went to the beat of his own drum as far as his basic character goes. And again, you have all that energy in fixed signs. It's somebody where it's going to be very hard for them to really to want to bend in a lot of instances. In this case, it was not meant to be. Sadly, that he was going to bend, to be pliable or adaptable to what the police had requested. But the thing with Rayshard Brooks is that when I look at his the chart, another thing that stood out to me is that he had no planets in fire. And when I cast the chart, of course, there were no major astrological influences in fire. He didn't have none of the 10 astrological planets, none of them were in fire. Of course, when you do a solar sunrise chart, of putting the ascendant and sun at the same position. So the ascendant is going to be in Aquarius as well. The MC was in Scorpio. So when you don't have any fire in your chart, a lot of times this could indicate the lack of the exuberance or enthusiasm, that motivation or drive to get going. It's the kind of lack of vitality. Perhaps it can to some degree, but I think what it is it's sometimes it's like you gotta light that. It's almost like you feel, from metaphorically speaking, lighting a fire under a person to get him going. He did cooperate somewhat with the police when they did ask him about his information, but it seemed like it just took him a while to be responsive to the police. The moon in Taurus, of course, is not going to respond exactly very rapidly. They're going to go kind of, go at their own pace, very methodically. And what I noticed too is that when I looked up the Rayshard Brooks shooting on Wikipedia.org, it stated that he had some problems with the police previously. He had a situation where he pled guilty to like false imprisonment. Interestingly enough, in the solar sunrise chart, he has Neptune in the 12th house, and that could be an indicator of some fallacious imprisonment. I mean, that's what he pled guilty to anyway. But the thing about it too is, and he also stated there was some charge they had on him on credit card fraud. He had Venus in Pisces, and right there, that could be an indicator. Venus and Pisces negatively manifested, and they get involved in fraudulent financial schemes. And there were no adverse aspects that were made to that in his chart based on the solar sunrise time. And when you don't have I think there's maybe a little bit of misconception regarding planets, astrological energy that doesn't have any adverse aspects to it. Now, in a lot of cases, when you have astrological energy, it doesn't have any adverse aspects to it. It can manifest very positively. But I think sometimes what happens is when you don't have anything adversarial to it, it allows the energy to go rather freely. And he might have been actually doing this for some time before actually being apprehended or convicted of this. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just speculating. It would not surprise me in the least. Now, another thing too, I noticed was very sad. A transit that took place when he died on this day on June 12th of 2020 was that the transit Sun in Gemini. What it did was it had passed in a you could say separating conjunction to his natal south node in Gemini at this time. And the thing is, when you have the sun, when you're having the sun and the south node involved in transit, remember that the south node is about what we could be leaving, what we're separating ourselves from. Sadly, the sun is connected with our vitality, our life, and that could be, sadly, I think, was an indicator of his life passing. And when you're talking about the sun being in Gemini, it's very mercurial energy, very changeable, fickle energy. And also, if I remember right on this, I'm going to confirm this, but I saw something stated there was some kind of cops have been putting pressure on Rayshard Brooks' shoulder, and shoulders first can be connected with Gemini, and you're talking about the sun being in Gemini at that time. And the thing about this too is that when I look at this, there was something also that was very eerie to me about Rayshard Brooks' chart. And when I looked at the event chart for that shooting, according to Wikipedia.org, the shooting took place. It was on June 12th, 2020, at 11:50 p.m. in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I cast the chart on Astro.com, the ascendant was like 10 degrees Aquarius. When I did a Rayshard Brooks chart, calculating it for the solar sunrise time, his sun was like 11 degrees Aquarius. When you look at an event chart, the event chart, when you look at the ascendant, that could represent or reflect the face of that event. Rayshard Brooks, of course, was the face of the event. And being the sun in Aquarius, again, it's something where we can see him as somebody that might have been a little bit of a rebel, a nonconformist, somebody a little bit unorthodox. Again, he had been convicted of some crime with credit card fraud. Aquarius in a negative manifestation may be about misrepresentation. You have the moon in Taurus injected into that sun Aquarius injected, flavoring the moon and Taurus energy, something of a financial nature, unfortunately. And based on the solar sunrise time, his sun in Aquarius squared his moon in Taurus. So not only by sign you have such a disparity in that energy, but you also have the square. So of course it makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with. His conscious side being the Sun in Aquarius versus the Moon in Taurus, Sun in Aquarius. Of course, the basic character going, not to be redundant, but could be somebody that's a little bit eclectic, a little basic character, a little eccentric, unorthodox, non-conforming, and even innovative. But the Moon in Taurus is just more about an unconscious need for to stay with the status quo, to be somewhat maybe a little bit monotonous, stubbornly earthbound, not really wanting to make any major change or deviate from what they're doing, and as far as their routine may go, or whatever it is in terms of what their beliefs might be. Aquarius, of course, could be very progressive. Taurus generally is not, to say the least. They're often satisfied with the true and the tried. But again, it really was very eerie when I looked at the ascendant point of that chart for the event chart of that shooting. And when I looked at Rayshard Lewis's Sun, and going back to the Sun is about life, don't forget. And the fact that it was right by the ascendant point of that, and right by the ascendant point of the event chart, it's not shocking. And no pun intended, Aquarius, of course, could be shocking energy, but it was a little bit shocking to me, I would say. And when I looked at the event chart too, I had noticed as well is that you had a triple conjunction with Pisces. It was a very tight stellium in Pisces involving Mars and Neptune and the Moon. And of course, Mars can be about action. You're talking about Neptune. As Neptune can be really about escapism. And then you have the Moon in Pisces. It's like the Moon could be connected with the public. And this energy, I mean, the fact that this was in Pisces, very confounding, very maybe somewhat unrealistic, to say the absolute least. And again, I'm not casting aspersions on Rayshard Brooks, but the reality is, if he doesn't flee, I mean, he's going to be, I mean, he'd be alive. He'd be alive today. We look at the incident earlier. I mean, we look at what happened with Sandra Bland back in 2015. That if she hadn't resisted arrest, she would have been likely alive today. There was speculation that maybe whether she hung herself or police did her in. And the thing is, we have to look at this. That when we not just going off on a Gemini moon tangent here, non-astrological info, is that the police pull anybody over, no matter how preposterous you think the reason is for them doing so, people. The best thing to do is do a Libra-like thing, whether you're a Libra or not, and cooperate with them. And the thing about it is, if you're innocent and you don't have any you have no outstanding warrants, and you're not guilty of anything, you're going to get out of it unscathed. Maybe worst case scenario, you might get some kind of citation or something. So it's just very important to follow these things, people. To really just follow your rules, the regulation. Do what you're supposed to do, and really listen to authority when authority says that you need to do such and such. When you resist, arrest, it could lead now to greater repercussions. We're seeing, it appears to be, I don't know the exact stats and numbers, there appears to be an escalation of police brutality and volatile behavior by police, excessive force being used by police when necessary, police brutality. And if people just collectively will be willing to cooperate and not let pride intervene and hurt and conflict with logical thinking, that could go a long way. I'm not condoning anything that the police have done, but what people have to remember is you have to be cooperative, because look at what's happened in these cases. You talk about Rayshard Brooks, you talk about, I believe, George Floyd and Sandra Bland, and these people, all three of them, I think, could have been alive today if they had just cooperated and done what they were supposed to, and not either try to take off or resist arrest or what have you. Those are things to look at. Oh, another thing I wanted to say. This may be the last thing I'm going to say about Rayshard Brooks' chart, is that when I looked at it, you could at least argue he had you could say a loose, fixed Grand Cross in it involving Chiron and Leo. Chiron can be about wounds, sometimes physical wounds. Pluto and Scorpio. Pluto is, of course, can be connected with death. The Sun in Aquarius. Sun can be about life, and then the Moon in Taurus. The Moon can be about the public. Your public image, and not the public image, but just something that might be connected with what you may be recognized as. And I think both the Moon and Taurus, sadly, maybe some people might have thought, some cynics out there might have seen Rayshard Brooks as somebody that was a little bit more stubborn and obstinate, more resistant than he needed, to be maybe too relaxed. You did too calm, not taking really maybe the situation as strong as he should. And another thing I noticed, two people, and I've said this, and not to be redundant, I'm being redundant saying the word redundant, but I looked in his chart. He also had a cardinal T-square. And when I've talked about previously, when you have a transit that opposes the focal point of that T-square configuration, a lot of times significant events could happen. Transit Chiron was making, I would say, very loose opposition to the focal point in his in the cardinal T-square configuration. Of course, Chiron is in Aries. Chiron can be not just about emotional wounds and suffering. Sometimes it can manifest in physical ones. Aries could be associated with gunfire. And when you have this, is opposing, I believe, is Jupiter and Libra. Jupiter can be connected, of course, with the law. And the thing about, you're talking about this energy, and of course something significant did happen to him very sadly. Another thing I noticed too, going back to his fixed Grand Cross configuration, at least a loose one, and that did include his natal Chiron in Leo. It's been stated, and I was looking in some reports online, that he was shot in the back, I believe, 2 times. Now, Leo rules the upper back. Now, I don't know if he got shot in the upper back or lower back, but it wouldn't surprise me if at least one of those bullets did hit his upper back, because Leo is the upper back. Of course, Leo is the upper back. Libra is connected with the lower back. He also had Mars in Cancer in his natal chart. Of course, Mars in Cancer is in its fall. It's in that debilitated state. It's in that worst placement. I have Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer, sadly, feel it can often manifest and have been in that perpetual battle just for life, just to survive, just to have basic subsistence needs in a home. And I've been going through that myself. And the thing about it is, I'm wondering too if any of those shots that hit his back might have pierced, gone out the other way, and might have pierced his chest, because the zodiac sign Cancer, of course, can be connected with the chest. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.